Right at this very moment, as my words reach your ears, a silent upheaval is taking place across the world, across all continents. A catastrophe which is not a product of happenstance, rather, it is a result of choices that humanity has made over the decades, often driven by a thirst of profit. It is a catastrophe we can no longer afford to ignore, for it speaks for the very survival of our species and countless others who share this beautiful planet with us. And so, growing up in my dad's village in Southern Punjab, I found peace in nature's embrace. I would run through the fields, spend hours listening to the whispers of the wind, fish at the headworks of Suleiman Key, and look for parrots on the eastern border. It was a world of wonder, a world that I wanted to spend my entire lifetime in. But in 2010, the love of my life and the land of my ancestors began to crumble before my eyes. I was only 7, but the floods that engulfed our land tore through my heart, leaving scars that have never healed. And so I remember I clung to my father's sofa, overhearing conversations about our crops being destroyed by the rising waters. Days turned into nights, and nights turned into months, but the echoes of that disaster refused to fade. And my baby cousins moved from place to place in search of a haven they could call home again. But for millions, the world moved on, as if the affected lives never mattered. And soon afterwards, in 2015, extreme heat waves started striking southern Pakistan and mercilessly claiming over 2,000 lives from heat stroke alone. Lives were shattered, families lost, all victims of a changing climate they had nothing to do with. And so I found myself standing at crossroads of despair and denial and hopelessness, unable to understand who was doing it and who had the responsibility to fix it. I felt small, I felt powerless to protect the place I held so dear to my heart. And soon afterwards, in 2020, the Australian wildfires happened, which turned 10 million hectares of land to ashes and reduced entire communities to ruins, and destroyed ecosystems that have never recovered and killed over 1 billion native animals. And in 2022, 2 years later, the monster floods of Pakistan happened, which displaced over 30 million people, each with a dream. But let me tell you something. Young people like me did not create this reality. We have inherited a legacy of criminal inaction and negligence. And so we're bearing witness to a global crisis of unprecedented proportions, the climate catastrophe. Consider this. Each year, human activity releases over 36 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, primarily from the burning of fossil fuels. And this excess carbon dioxide traps heat, leading to a rise in global temperatures. And according to research, only 100 companies based in the global north are responsible for 71% of these emissions. And so capitalism, with its emphasis on profit and unregulated market forces, has driven these industries to prioritize short-term economic gains over our collective well-being. And similarly, colonialism and imperialism have historically exploited resources and labor from colonized regions to run these industries. And so this global history of resource extraction and unequal development has resulted and contributed to the unequal distribution of the impacts of climate change, with marginalized communities like mine and yours bearing the brunt of its consequences. And instead of treating Earth like a precious entity that gives us life, Western colonial legacies operate within a paradigm that assumes that they can extract whatever natural resources they want and the Earth will regenerate itself. And these systems of power and oppression, such as white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, and colonialism, do not occur in isolation. They interlock and they collide and they collaborate to create something greater than the sum of their parts. And therefore, I want you to know something. Climate crisis is not isolated. It is a symptom of interconnected problems. It's not just about the environment, it's about misinformation, it's about health, it's about governance, it's about education, fashion, technology, and above all, it's about inequality. And so it's a web of challenges that demands a united front from all walks of life. And so much of what we have to do to fix climate change is going to solve other problems too. There are almost 192 nations in the world and only one atmosphere, which means that everything is interconnected, whether it's ecology or the economies or the climate system itself. And so I've since spent almost 10 years lobbying policymakers in boardrooms and working with civil society and young people in classrooms. And we're faced with a daunting truth here. We are the last generation with the chance to save the fate of humanity. And so in conference rooms and on panels, I'm told that I'm too emotional and I should wait until I grow up. But the cold, harsh truth, however, is that we, the last generation entrusted with the potential to safeguard humanity's future, do not have the luxury of waiting. And so, because of this, night after night, I find myself unable to sleep because of the existential dread. And it's not a result of scrolling through the gloomy content. Rather, it stems from the very belief that adults in our lives, especially those in power, do not care. And we're living beings, and our life support system is in danger, so it would be weird to not be stressed about it. And so I try to remember one of the things that one of my mentors once said to me, that every emotion has an evolutionary intelligence, which means that fear tells us to prioritize the issue, anger tells us that there is something important that needs to be protected, and grief is how we come to accept things we can no longer change. And talking of emotions, there's a stark contrast between the emotions felt by young people who often are overwhelmed by despair and adults in our lives who tend to cope with situations by resorting to denial. And so when with adults and when with my 10-year-old younger sister, I asked them to describe the future they envision. And adults paint picture of a world where there would be no diseases, with AI potentially surpassing human capabilities. And my 10-year-old younger sister describes a tale of a world where she'll lose her Persian cat to extreme heat waves, or her favorite vacation spot, Hunza Valley, to extreme floodings. This is the kind of future no one wants waiting for them. And so, while anger and frustration wake us to the issue, they can also cause us to shut down. If we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, neither despair nor denial is going to help anyone. And so the story of denial sounds something like it's not up to me because it's too big to fix. And the story of despair sounds something like it's not up to me because someone else will fix it. And so, do you hear the similarity? Despair and denial might appear to exist on opposite ends of the generational spectrum, yet they stem from the same place, how powerless we feel, all of us. And studies by psychologists say that if our stories say, I feel powerless, no matter what I do, I will feel whatever I do is not enough. And so therefore, our attitude therefore is pessimism, and it does not cultivate the internal ecosystem which makes us feel powerful enough to be able to serve community, Mother Earth, and ourselves. On the other hand, if we bring the mindset that I do have the power, I will identify the skills that I bring, and I will find impact of focus. Our expectation, therefore, would be that I will make a difference. Whether it's changing a mindset, moving the system, or starting a movement. And we all have these stories running on repeat, paralyzing us with feelings of powerlessness. Stories of cautious corporate leaders who maintain the status quo because going against it might cost them their jobs, calculating policymakers, and young people overwhelmed by despair and despairing not just the future but the present that we are inheriting. And we have stories of sharing climate articles in WhatsApp groups, someone going vegetarian, someone recycling, probably buying an electric car, and yet the climate breakdown continues to risk our collective future. And so in the middle of all this, I realized something. There is a threat even greater than climate change. It's how powerless we feel in the face of it. And we have had the technology, we have had the resources, aka money, and the human capability to solve this climate crisis, yet we critically lacked the right mindset. And so, what if we flip the script? What if we realize that the biggest challenge faced by humanity today could be countered by just changing mindsets? What if we realized that we do have the power to make ourselves responsible? I'm not saying that you have to stop climate change because, of course, it is outside your control, but there is something in your control. And that is your mindset. That is the only thing that has ever been in your control. And I'm here to talk about it. Even though climate science tells us that we've passed some tipping points and we're seeing it being translated in our communities with more wildfires, with extreme floodings, heat waves, and food system collapse, and what we need the most in the face of it is resilience. What we need the most is how do we empower ourselves to still act and look in the face of all this grief, anger, frustration, and fear and use it to catalyze action. And so I have a question for you. Ask yourself, which story gets in the way of you taking action? And then think of one thing you could do to challenge that story. I'm not saying that you don't have to say that I'm just one in 7.8 billion people. I'm not an expert. I don't have the experience. I'm too small to make a difference. Because we may have inherited this reality, but we have the power to reshape it. See what you're best at, and then use that passion to contribute to climate action. We need to turn away from being mere spectators to our planet's problems to becoming the protagonist of the story. One thing that I say a lot in every speech and on every panel is that nobody has to do everything, but everybody has to do something. And so it's about the humility of finding your peace and knowing that there are other people doing theirs, and then having connections to some of those people so you don't feel like you're alone in this journey. And so an average person spends over 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime. How do you want to spend that time is the main question. When you look back on your life, what do you want to see? What do you want your story to be? Will you choose hopelessness, despair, denial, or something different? Will you have chosen to just quit and look in the face of all this grief, frustration, and pain and just sit silently? Or you want to be remembered as someone who did something to fix all of this, who at least tried? And so as you head home today, I have a question for you, and I want you to remember it and let it linger in your mind. What do you want your story to be? It will help you find your peace in this battle against climate change and shape your personal story on this crucial and defining moment of our collective future and global history. Thank you.